Here are 6 more ways in which Donald Trump's foreign policy is headed toward disaster. As conservatives fight the efforts of their former party and the president who hijacked it to promote Obamacare 2.0 here at home, there are some major problems with the direction and foreign policy of the Trump regime. So leads Daniel Horowitz at conservativereview.com. We can dismiss all reports of liberal policies and leftist personnel emanating from this administration as fake news. Or we can demand a course correction before this becomes the 3rd term of Obama's State Department. The choice. Well, I wish the choice was ours. The final dramatic act of the Obama regime was to instigate a public feud between former Commissar of State John Kerry and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over whether Jews can live in their own country. As conservatives, we swore to ourselves that once Trump assumed power, we'd be done with the illogical and immoral Oslo Accords, along with its maniacal idea of creating a new Arab terror state. Trump himself also promised direction. On December 28, 2016, he tweeted, "Not anymore. The beginning of the end was the horrible Iran deal, and now this UN, i.e. the UN, stay strong, Israel. January 20th is fast approaching." He also tweeted the same day, 6 minutes earlier, "We cannot continue to let Israel be treated with such total disdain and disrespect. They used to have a great friend in the U.S., but not anymore." Yeah. See, the reason this issue is important is not just because of our relationship with Israel. It's that the obsession with a Palestinian state and the recognition of the Palestinian Liberation Organization's terrorists has served as the fulcrum of our entire Middle East policy for 24 years, preventing us from acting in our own self-interests. The failure to understand the danger of the PLO is not just bad for Israel. It's also dangerous for America because it demonstrates that our political elites don't understand the Islamic threat and will continue the past mistakes of both the Clinton and Obama leftists and the, House Bush, who support the nation building in the Arab world. Well, that nightmare is now upon us. During Donald Trump's 2nd week in office, Mr. Horowitz took a lot of flack for criticizing the White House's statement on Israel's construction and the so-called settlements. Some conservatives felt that Trump's statement was a breath of fresh air because while he did rebuke the construction, he implied that building within the settlement blocks is okay. Well, obviously, as was noted at the time, this statement is nonsense. Why are we getting involved in any of this Kerry-style dictating of terms? Weren't we supposed to break from the entire Oslo Accords? Why should we legitimize any notion of a Palestinian state, and how does that put America's interests first? Weren't we done with nation building and terror states among existing nations, much less trying to create a new one? We warned that absent a course correction, this policy would grow legs and irrevocably suck Trump into the globalist swamp of the PLO cause. And it has. Consider the following troubling observations, and we're going to get into a number of these in detail, ladies and gentlemen. First off, last week Trump dispatched Jason Greenblatt, his top lawyer and envoy to the Middle East, to pressure Netanyahu into halting construction, even for a city designed to house displaced Israelis who were uprooted by a very painful evacuation. As the Times of Israel is reporting, Greenblatt is now obsessing over every last neighborhood with the maniacal precision of John Kerry, to prevent Israel from building even within existing settlements. The pressure is reportedly so strong that Netanyahu has now held off on his plans to fully annex Ma'ale Adumim, the largest suburb of Jerusalem, which has always been a consensus area, even to those who buy into the premise of a Palestinian state. Greenblatt later met with Palestinian Authority chieftain Mahmoud Abbas, whose term of office expired 8 years ago, and treated him like a peace partner. Jordan Schlocktoll, a Conservative Review, goes into some deeper and necessarily deeper detail on how the Trump regime is making a big mistake, a huge mistake, in thinking Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas is a peace broker, which he isn't. The Trump regime is making the same mistake that past administrations have made when it comes to Israeli-Palestinian relations, viewing dictatorial Palestinian leadership as individuals who are all interested in achieving peace. Alarmingly, the Trump determined that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is a legitimate peace broker when in fact he is the obstacle to peace. Trump dispatched his aide Jason Greenblatt to Israel and the Palestinian territories last week to meet with the leaders on both sides of the divide. Ambassador Greenblatt, who has long been one of Trump's attorneys but has no diplomatic experience, first met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. According to the readout of their conversation, Greenblatt centered the 5-hour discussion around making peace with the Palestinians. Trump has expressed publicly that direct negotiations are the only way for negotiations to move forward. Surprisingly, the Netanyahu-Greenblatt conversation seemed to convey that the White House felt the free democratic nation of Israel was not doing enough in its outreach efforts to the Palestinians. Gee, that sounds like past 8 years, doesn't it? Then, on Tuesday, Greenblatt met with President Abbas, who is serving his 12th year of a 4-year term in Ramallah. Moving parallel with past White House administrations, Greenblatt's team promoted the fiction that the Palestinian Authority held a determination to combat violence and terrorism that could not be further from the truth. Palestinian Authority invests up to 10% of its annual budget paying terrorists and martyred terrorist families' annual salaries. Fatah, the political party that controls the Palestinian Authority, was founded as a terrorist organization. Palestinian Liberation Organization, remember them? The group has carried out thousands of terrorist attacks over the past decades and continues to openly incite its followers to commit acts of terrorism. Abbas committed to preventing inflammatory rhetoric and incitement? The statement added? Well, no, he didn't. It's quite the confusing and misleading statement, actually. Abbas, a Holocaust denier, is known to engage in the usual use of anti-Semitic tropes. Worse, his frequent incitement has riled up local terror groups on their hell-bent quest to destroy the Jewish state. In 2015, he falsely claimed that Israel's Jews were desecrating the Al-Aqsa Jerusalem Mosque, the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount, setting off a series of terrorist attacks in reaction to his statement. Mahmoud Abbas is an enemy of peace, an enemy of freedom, and an enemy of security. Pretending he and his government is anything other than that does real damage to actual peace prospects between the Israelis and the Palestinians. By the way, the Palestinians are not an ethnicity. They're not a nationality either. It's a total made-up, fictitious designation. Abbas, who rules over an area that has become the most anti-Semitic territory on the planet, is the problem, not The solution. The inimitable Carolyn Glick gives a riveting account of the sharp turn of the Trump White House on Israel, or rather against Israel, embracing the PLO, inviting Abbas to the White House, and taking an active, almost obsessive role in promoting a Palestinian state. It's almost as if Trump has made it his life's mission, or rather his son-in-law Jared Kushner's mission, to ram through the peace process even more than Obama did. Donald Trump, I know, right, is losing his focus. Gee, that's never happened before. If he doesn't get it back soon, he will fail to make America great again or safe again in the Middle East. After holding out for a month, last week Trump indicated he is adopting his predecessor's obsession with empowering the PLO. Needless to say, this is a fantastically strategic error. There are many actors and conflicts in the Middle East that challenge and threaten U.S. national interests and U.S. national security. Iran's rise as a nuclear power and regional hegemon, the war in Syria, Turkey's abandonment of the West, and Russia's regional power play all pose major threats to U.S. power, security, and interests. The Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamic State, Hamas, and other Sunni jihadist movements all threaten the United States, Europe, and the United States' Sunni allies in the region in a manner that is strategically significant to America. But none of these issues, none of these actors, and none of these threats are in any way related to or caused by the PLO and its interminable European-supported hybrid terror and political war against Israel. None of these pressing concerns will be advanced by a U.S. embrace of the PLO or a renewed obsession with empowering the PLO and its mafia terrorist bosses. To the contrary, all of these pressing concerns will be sidelined, and so made more pressing and dangerous by a U.S. re-engagement with the PLO. And yet, over the past week, Trump has indicated that the PLO is now his focus. Last Friday, Trump spoke on the telephone with Mahmoud Abbas. Abbas is head of the PLO and the unelected dictator of the corrupt, terrorism-sponsoring, PLO-controlled Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. In other words, Palestinian-occupied Israel. According to media reports, Trump told Abbas, whose legal term in office ended 8 years ago, you will recall, that he views him as a legitimate leader. Legitimate leader. Birds of a feather. According to the official White House report of the conversation, Trump also reportedly told Abbas that he supports reaching a deal between Israel and the Palestinians. In other words, forcing a deal on Israel that surrenders to the Palestinians. Such a deal, to the extent it has ever reached, involves expanding PLO control over, pretty much all of Israel. Trump also invited Abbas for an official visit to Washington. And the day after they spoke, the Trump regime moved $250 million to Abbas's police state, where for the past 25 years, Abbas and his cronies have enriched themselves while feeding a steady diet of anti-Semitic, anti-American jihadist bile to their impoverished subjects. To build up his credibility with the PLO, Trump put his electoral pledge to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem on ice. One more broken Trump promise. The real estate mogul that's the term that Glick used. The real estate mogul ordered Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to deny Jews the right to their own property and their legal right to use state lands in Judea and Samaria. And swift on the heels of that conversation with Abbas, Trump's chief negotiator, Jason Greenblatt, was dispatched to Jerusalem to begin empowering the PLO at Israel's expense. Sounds like the last 8 years, doesn't it? According to media reports, Greenblatt intended to use this meeting Monday with Netanyahu to reject Netanyahu's commitment to build a new Israeli town in Samaria. Greenblatt was also reportedly intending to dictate the parameters for yet another round of negotiations with the PLO. After meeting with Netanyahu, Greenblatt continued on to Ramallah to embrace Abbas. Also during his stay, Greenblatt is scheduled to meet with IDF generals, Israeli Defense Force, who were responsible for giving money and providing services to the effing PLO. And Greenblatt doesn't have the Palestinians to himself. Following Trump's conversation with Abbas, plans were suddenly afloat for Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner and Trump's daughter Ivanka, in other words, the Democrats, to visit Israel and spend an afternoon with Abbas in Ramallah. Gotta wonder what our enemies think about this foolishness. It's like it's too good to be. It's like, we thought Obama was a total, utter, and complete fool. We had no idea. We had no idea that the Americans could top Barack Obama, but we were wrong. If things develop as reported, then Trump is serious about embracing the PLO and intends to have his top advisors devote themselves to Abbas and his henchmen. If that is the case, then Trump is setting himself, his advisors, his daughter, and the U.S. up to fail and be humiliated again. See, the PLO is the siren that drowns U.S. administrations. It is to the PLO that America's top envoys have eagerly flown, gotten hooked on the attention of the demented anti-Israel press corps, and forgotten their purpose: to advance U.S. national interests. If Trump is serious about repeating this practice, then rather than repair the massive damage done to the U.S. and Middle East by his predecessor, the 45th president will repeat their mistakes. Like them, he will leave office in a blaze of failure. To understand why this is the case, 3 things must be clear. First, the PLO will never, ever make peace with Israel. There will never be a Palestinian state. There will never be a peace or a Palestinian state because the PLO wants neither. This is the lesson of the past 25 years. Both Abbas and his predecessor, Arafat, rejected peace and statehood multiple times and opted instead to expand their terrorist and political war against Israel. And why did they do that? Because they are interested in 2 things: personal enrichment, which they achieve by stealing donor funds and emptying the pockets of their own people, and weakening with the goal of destroying Israel, which they achieve through their hybrid war of terrorism and political warfare. The second thing that needs to be clear is that the Palestinians are irrelevant to the rest of the problems, the real problems that impact U.S. interests in the region. If anything, the Palestinians are pawns in the larger chessboard. America's enemies use them to distract the Americans from the larger realities so that the U.S. will not pay attention to the real game. Iran will not be appeased or defeated if Trump empowers the PLO in its war against Israel and continues feeding PLO leaders insatiable appetite for other people's money. The Sunni jihadists will not beat their swords into plowshares if the U.S. coerces Israel to cough up land to the PLO. To the contrary, they will be emboldened. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin will not move his forces out of Syria or stop giving nuclear technology to Iran if the United States turns the screws to Israel. Putin will come to the conclusion that Trump is either weak or stupid to damage Israel, the United States' most serious Middle East ally. And, gee, no wonder he wanted Trump to win. And of course, Israel will not be better off if Trump decides to push it back into the peace train that has caused it nothing but harm for the past quarter century. Trump's election opened up the possibility for the first time in decades that the United States would end its destructive obsession with the PLO. For 3 months, Israelis have been free for the first time to discuss seriously the possibilities of applying Israeli law to all parts of Judea and Samaria, and a massive majority of Israelis support doing just that. On the Palestinian side as well, Trump's election empowered the people who have been living under the jackboot of a boss and his cronies to think about the possibility of living at peace with Israel in a post-PLO era. Polling results indicate they are too eager to move beyond the Palestinian statehood chimera. But now it appears that Trump has been convinced to embrace the PLO obsession. The same entrenched bureaucrats at the State Department and the same foreign policy establishment in Washington that brought the United States nothing but failure in the Middle East for a generation appear to have captivated Trump's foreign policy. They have convinced him it is better to devote his top advisors to repeating the mistakes of his predecessor than to devote his energies and theirs to fixing the mess that Barack Obama stuck him with. They have gotten him to believe that it is better to empower the PLO than develop coherent strategies and plans for dealing with the problems of the region that actually endanger U.S. interests and imperil the security and safety of the American people. The aforementioned Jordan Schachtel has already reported that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson appointed a Kerry acolyte as the Israeli Palestinian policy official in the State Department. Michael Ratney was Obama's consul to Jerusalem, who oversaw grants to One Voice, a leftist nonprofit that Obama allegedly used to try to unseat Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel's 2015 election. Ratney oversaw a program that the Times of Israel said was, in effect, setting up an armed Palestinian militia in the consulate. Martin Indyk, Obama's anti-Israel apologist, praised the appointment, tweeting that Ratney was a valued member of Kerry's peace team. One of John Kerry's closest confidants is now in charge of the Israeli-Palestinian portfolio at the Trump State Department. Mark Toner, the acting State Department spokesman and an Obama regime holdover, announced Wednesday that Michael Ratney, a former U.S. consul to Jerusalem, will now take point on the Middle East conflict. Martin Indyk, former U.S. ambassador to Israel, who has been described as the Obama regime's anti-Israel apologist, praised the appointment, tweeting that Ratney was a valued member of Kerry's peace team. Here's the tweet. State Department announced Tuesday Michael Ratney to handle Middle East peace process at State. Former Con-Gen JM and valued member of Kerry's peace team. Whatever. Joel Bronold, the executive director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace, which is rife with anti-Israel membership, also gave approval for the appointment. Quote, Michael Ratney running point for Israel-Palestine at State for the time being means all of us can breathe a little. Yeah, breathe a little. Breathe in more of that anti-Semitic poison. Controversy has been ubiquitous throughout Michael Ratney's Israel-related career. While he served as Jerusalem consul, Ratney oversaw grants to One Voice, a leftist nonprofit that Obama allegedly used to try to unseat Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel's 2015 election. There was nothing alleged about it. About $350,000 was dumped into One Voice to build a voter database, train activists, and hire a political consulting firm with ties to Barack Obama's campaign. The group hired a former top Obama campaign official, Jeremy Bird, described by the New York Times as the architect of the former president's grassroots campaign in efforts to oust Netanyahu. After word of Obama potentially interfering in a foreign election was released, an investigation was opened up in the matter. However, when Congress called upon Ratney to release his emails, he claimed ignorance, saying he never saw the ones related to One Voice, and even more suspiciously, he deleted the evidence. Of course he did. Ratney's deletion of his emails instead of archiving them put him in direct violation of the State Department's policies. You know, the Hillary Clinton policies. Not established by her, but established because of her. He claimed he was not aware of the rule at the time. Oh, well, isn't that just special? Yeah, of course he wasn't aware. As U.S. Consul to Jerusalem, Ratney was in charge of overseeing a controversial Palestinian arms training program that violated a 2011 agreement with the Israeli government, according to the Times of Israel. Ratney's staffers were in effect setting up an armed Palestinian militia in the consulate, an Israeli officer said at the time. They are being trained with weapons in Krav Maga and tactical driving. It's irresponsible. Who can guarantee that such weapons in the hands of Palestinians won't spread to terror, he asked. Well, that's a rhetorical question if ever there was one. After his controversial tenure in Jerusalem, Ratney then served as U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, a position he currently maintains in the State Department. Michael Ratney is a holdover from an administration that constantly demonized the state of Israel from top to bottom. In his last days in office, John Kerry delivered perhaps the most anti-Israel speech ever from a sitting U.S. Secretary of State. The question remains, why has the Department of State under current Secretary Rex Tillerson and President Donald Trump decided to designate John Kerry's deputy as the man in charge of Israeli-Palestinian peace? The State Department did not return a request for clarification on Ratney's role in time for publication. Gee, that's a shock. Trump decided to keep, as well, Obama's National Security Council advisor, Yael Lempert, for Israel policy. She accompanied Greenblatt on his trip to Israel, where he graciously met with Abbas and pressured Netanyahu on settlements. Lempert was literally Obama's point person in the White House orchestrating his war against Israel. This decision is Orwellian. And Trumpian as well, obviously. Now, talking about the fox guarding the hen house, you want to use that metaphor? Here's a name for you. Sahar Nowruzada. Sahar Nowruzada. The Iran director for Obama's National Security Council. Can you believe this? I can. He has been given the portfolio over the Persian Gulf region on the policy planning staff at the Trump State Department. This individual was an essential figure in pushing through the Iran deal, the Iran nuclear sellout, and has ties to Tehran. So I guess now Trump does too. Jordan Schachtel, reporting again at conservativereview.com. A trusted Obama aide who once worked for an alleged Iranian regime lobbying group is one of the individuals now in charge of Iran policy planning at the State Department under Secretary Rex Tillerson and President Donald J. Trump. Sahar Nowruzadeh, the Iran director for former President Obama's National Security Council, has burrowed into the government under President Trump. She's now in charge of Iran and the Persian Gulf region on the policy planning staff at the State Department. Gee, how did this happen? To make matters worse, Nowruzadeh is a former employee of the National Iranian American Council, a nonprofit that is accused of being a lobbying group for the Iranian regime. NIAC's current president, Trita Parsi, has long held close relationships with top officials in the Tehran dictatorship. And now, I suppose, so does Donald Trump. In February, a group of over 100 prominent Iranian dissidents called for Congress to investigate the National Iranian American Council's ties to the Iranian regime. Fat chance of that happening now, I guess. One of Nowruzadeh's primary duties under Barack Obama was to promote initiatives that pushed the Iran nuclear sellout. As Obama's National Security Council director for Iran, Nowruzadeh sat in on high-level briefings along with Obama, former Vice President Joe Biden, and former Commissar of State John Kerry. His top White House staff created false narratives on the Iran deal to sell to the American public. According to the head of a state-run Iranian newspaper, Nowruzadeh was an essential element to pushing through the Iran nuclear sellout. Editor-in-chief Imad Abshanas said that she opened up a direct line of communication with the Iranian president's brother. She helped clear a number of contradictions and allowed the entire endeavor to succeed, Abshanas said of her efforts. Nowruzadeh's advocacy for Barack Obama's directives resulted in an agreement that has done enormous damage to the security interests of the United States and its allies. Iran, the world's top sponsor of international terrorism, was gifted $150 billion with a B billion dollars for agreeing to the deal. He sold out and we paid them to sell out. And I don't think they needed to be. The deal will not restrict Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. In fact, the regime in Tehran may now have the operational capacity to deploy nuclear warheads, and probably has had that capacity for almost the past decade. Towards the end of Obama's tenure, Nowruzadeh was embedded into the State Department and for a brief time served as its Persian language spokeswoman. In addition to Nowruzadeh, several other prominent Obama officials currently serve under Secretary Tillerson and President Obama at the State Department. A former John Kerry apprentice, Michael Ratney, as we just discussed earlier, occupies the Israeli-Palestinian portfolio there. Another trusted Obama aide, Yael Lempert, as we discussed earlier, also serves under Tillerson on the same platform. Why Tillerson and Trump have decided to keep on chief Obama policy officials, that doesn't seem unclear to me. Seems quite obvious, doesn't it? The State Department did not return multiple requests for comment seeking additional information on Nowruzadeh's role at the government agency. Again, gee, what a shock, huh? And then there's Secretary of Defense James Mad Dog Mattis, who, for all the accolades he's been given as a top-notch soldier and warrior, wanted to appoint Ann Patterson to the number 3 position in the Trumpagon. Patterson was, of course, Obama's ambassador to Egypt, who had ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and embodied John Kerry's foreign policy. Although conservatives successfully prevented that from happening, Mattis's motivations, along with a number of troubling statements on policy, reveal that he fundamentally does not share a conservative worldview. Say, why does General Mattis want the female John Kerry at a top Trumpagon post? Jordan Schachtel examines that question at conservativereview.com. If Defense Secretary James Mattis gets his way, Ann Patterson, and he didn't apparently, Ann Patterson, former U.S. ambassador to Egypt, will become the next U.S. Undersecretary of Defense, according to a report in Politico. But the White House is reportedly pushing back against her candidacy, and they have several reasons to be concerned. At first glance, it appears Patterson is well qualified for the position. In addition to Egypt, she has also served as ambassador to Colombia and Pakistan. But throughout her long tenure, Patterson not only fully embraced the policies of Barack Obama that aligned with Islamic fundamentalist actors and alienated Israel, but she also led the way in demonizing our allies and empowering our enemies. In 2012, Patterson lobbied for closer ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist group that seeks to impose a global Islamic caliphate. She went as far as to meet with Muhammad Badi, the supreme guide of the Brotherhood. Badi has called for the destruction of the United States and Israel and has described the United States as an infidel nation that is heading toward its demise. Following Patterson's coziness with the Islamic authoritarians, Patterson's antics outraged the Egyptian people, who were planning to take to the streets in protest of the authoritarian Muslim regime that had just seized power. Pardon the redundancy, authoritarian Muslim. There's no such thing as a Muslim regime that isn't authoritarian. Some marched in the streets with signs declaring her and Obama supporters of terrorism in Egypt. While ambassador to Egypt, her American embassy famously released a statement apologizing for a controversial YouTube video criticizing Islam's head prophet Muhammad. The statement came in the wake of the jihadist attack in Benghazi, Libya, that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. Because of her disastrous tenure as ambassador to Egypt, Patterson will be forever recognizable and will forever be a recognizable and despised figure in Cairo. Patterson not only destroyed relations with Egyptian liberals in her position, she left a trail of destruction throughout the rest of the Middle East. In 2014, as an Assistant Secretary of State, she gave false testimony to Congress about the Palestinian Authority's salaries for terrorists. Despite plenty of evidence and reports proving terrorist salaries, Patterson disputed the charge, refusing to use the word terrorist to describe the jihadists. Moreover, she pushed back against Congressman Randy Weber of Texas, who advised that the United States should ask the Palestinian Authority to stop paying stipends to terrorists and their families. And Patterson's pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel behavior continued last year. In November, Patterson issued a bizarre statement declaring a terrorist who attempted to murder Israelis as the victim of an Israeli attack, demanding answers from the Israeli government. Pro-Israel critics were shocked by the Obama regime's reaction to the incident. One editorial on the subject was headlined, "Obama transforms Palestinian American terrorist into victim." In addition to her anti-Israel sentiments, Patterson fought against efforts to declare Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps a terrorist group, something Donald Trump has weighed doing, and has clearly weighed against it. The Imperial Iranian Guard Corps is charged by the Iranian regime with exporting its theocratic Islamic revolution worldwide. The military entity has sent troops into battle on behalf of the Bashar al-Assad dictatorship in Syria. The Iranian Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has plotted terrorist attacks on American soil, and the group frequently funnels weapons and supplies to terrorist groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas. Perhaps Patterson's worst sin of all was her underselling the threat posed by the Islamic State, in accordance with Barack Obama's famous labeling of the jihadi group, or jihadist group, as a JV team. According to the Washington Free Beacon, Patterson and officials told senators they were not sure what to do after being caught off guard by the group's rise. And Patterson is the female John Kerry. Just like Kerry, she has left behind a trail of death, destruction, and chaos everywhere she has surfaced. And now she is a key member of Trump's Middle East foreign policy team. What does that tell you about Donald Trump? Well, let's take a step back and look at Mad Dog Mattis himself, as Andrew Lappin did at the American Spectator. Because it turns out that while Mattis may be great on ISIS, not so much the rest of the Middle East, particularly not on Israel. General James Mad Dog Mattis appears to be moving rapidly to the top of Donald Trump's list of candidates for Secretary of Defense. So this was, oh wow, all the way back in November. But this is background. This is background we need to know. Appointed during the Obama administration from 2010 to 2013, Mattis headed the United States Central Command, which has authority over all U.S. forces in the Middle East. Not reflected in his muscular and accomplished resume, however, is a surprisingly anachronistic understanding of the ideological dynamics in the region, a woefully outmoded policy template that urgently needs updating in view of Iran's hegemonic designs. Instead of attributing the region's atrocities to Islamic fundamentalism's 14-century-old track record, Mattis blames regional anti-Western hostility on the Arab street's perception of the injustice of oppression suffered by Palestinians under the Israeli occupation. And remember, Barack Obama, there's nothing Barack Obama did that wasn't political. And no appointment that he made that was not political. Do you seriously think that Barack Obama would have appointed James Mad Dog Mattis to head the United States Central Command if Mattis wasn't on the same page as Barack Obama regarding Islam in the Middle East? And now he's Trump's SecDef. At the 2013 Aspen Security Forum, speaking about the Israeli-Palestinian situation, Mattis defended the two-state solution and repeated the oft-quoted State Department mantra of putting a bullseye on Israeli intransigence. I paid a military security price every day as a commander of CENTCOM because the Americans were seen as biased in support of Israel. Calling instead of, whereas being biased in favor of the Palestinians, that's perfectly wonderful. Great! Calling Israeli control of Judea and Samaria unsustainable, Mattis warned that Jewish settlements could turn Israel into an apartheid state. Mattis has already witnessed the political upheaval of the Arab Spring and the sobering reality that Islamic fundamentalism has been the unrelenting driver of more tortured deaths of innocent Muslims than any other religion or ideology. With the vast accumulation of wealth in the region, he continues to see only a dribble of financial relief from oil-rich nations seeking to lessen the suffering of their brethren. Apparently, Muslim lives matter except when Muslims have to help other Muslims. The false hypothesis that seeks to pawn Islamic fundamentalist atrocities off on an invalidated sense of injustice does not square up in the face of Muslim-on-Muslim killing. History clearly demonstrates that Muslim enmity is not about anything that Western civilization has done. Rather, it's about an internal conflict interpreted by some Muslims as Quranic mandate for imperialistic subjugation of non-believers. Hence the term, why I use the term Islamic fundamentalism, because that is what the Quran teaches. In spite of this historical truth, coupled with the morally bankrupt nature of the ruling Palestinian kleptocracy, Mattis continues to cling to an invalidated theory of regional anti-Western hostility. There is no doubt that the man who once said, "Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet," will wage a far more intense battle against ISIS than what we have yet seen. But the job doesn't stop there. Israel's essential contribution to this effort should not be understated. Aside from the invaluable geostrategic advantages, Israel is an innovative and experienced operator when it comes to Islamic fundamentalism. They would need to be. Unlike the other helpers in the region, Israel is politically impregnable to Islamic fundamentalist influence. This is more than can be said about our NATO allies, most of whom are up to their eyeballs in emerging and vocal Muslim populations. With the unbelievable appeasement of our arch foe Iran, it may also be concluded that our very own policy-making apparatus has been insidiously encroached upon by Islamic fundamentalist influence. Within the context of Iranian hegemony and the prevailing UN bias against Israel, General Mattis's appointment threatens to expose Israel to diplomatic tyranny that will have dire strategic consequences, as we've already seen in this segment. Territorial concessions or gestures of support for Palestinian sovereignty that have been diplomatically extorted will serve only to increase Israel's burden of defense. Stripping Israel of the control of Judean and Samarian borders would serve only to handicap its military capacity as a vital geostrategic platform in the face of Islamic fundamentalism's expansive objectives. That doesn't sound like something that a general who likes the smell of victory would want to do. Of course, it also depends on who he wants to win. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not deep state sabotage of Donald Trump's agenda. This is Trump sabotaging himself by allowing Jared, his liberal son-in-law, in the White House and top officials in state to promote the very worst elements of the Obama foreign policy. And it's not just about Israel. Anyone who believes in creating a new terror state and partnering with PLO terrorists clearly does not understand the broader Islamic threat. This could lead us into nation building in Syria and other insufferable Arab countries, a notion Trump explicitly rejected with his popular denunciation of the Iraq War. See, there is nothing to negotiate and nobody with which we can cut deals. This is not a matter of convincing Carrier to keep extorting Carrier to keep its plant in Indiana. Some things don't work with negotiations. Islamic fundamentalist elements are one good example. What is so disappointing is that foreign policy is the one area where the president has wide latitude to change course without the cumbersome legislative process. Almost 60 days into the new administration, there is no major accomplishment that has gotten past Congress, including the much-promised full repeal of Obamacare. Again, foreign policy is the one area where Donald Trump can unilaterally make his mark. However, absent a dramatic change of course, the pink unicorn of the PLO peace process will ensnare Donald Trump into untenable diplomatic quicksand. As Carolyn Glick warned, the PLO is the siren that drowns U.S. administrations. Trump must understand that if he is serious about embracing the PLO and intends to have his top advisors devote themselves to Abbas and his henchmen, he is setting himself up to fail and be humiliated. Now make no mistake, the two-state solution is the Obamacare of foreign policy. Failure to repeal it will be as catastrophic for foreign policy as Obamacare is for domestic policy. Except this time we won't be able to blame the parliamentarian. But there is one other possibility to consider, folks. Maybe Trump embraced Obama's foreign policy after all along. Maybe Trump is a liberal. Maybe Trump is a liberal Democrat. Maybe he always was. And you people just didn't want to believe it. But now, here's the evidence before your own disbelieving eyes. In other words, Donald Trump is Barack Obama's third term. Deal with that, bitches.